So, okay, welcome back for the last talk before lunch, and presented by Stefan, and I forgot it, Efnik. Eftik, sorry. Please start.
Okay, you know the joke, I'm the last one between you and the lunch, so I will try not to be too long. Yes, I work for AFNIC, which is the domain name registry of .fr, France. So despite my name, I'm French. Don't try to talk to me in German, it won't work. You may try in English, it's possible that it works, not sure. So AFNIC is a domain name registry, which means that we work a lot with the DNS. And my experience with the DNS is that it's both a very critical infrastructure of the internet. Without the DNS, nothing works. Some people tell me, oh, but I can use a BitTorrent with IP addresses. Yeah, but how do you find the magnet? You go to a search engine, and then you need the DNS for that. So DNS is both critical and undervalued by most people. Most people don't realize how important it is. For instance, one of the biggest French banks has a web server which is spread in 3 different data centers with load balancers, firewalls, a lot of things to keep the DNS, the web service up, but they have only 2 name servers, both in the same rack. So if there is a problem, bang. And it's much more difficult to get money to improve the DNS service than for the web service, because anyone, even the top-level managers of the bank, know that the web service is critical. But for the DNS, it's not always the case. So a few reminders about the DNS, which are necessary to understand my point. So the DNS is a distributed database. Distributed means that, well, it's very difficult, as you know, to have a consistent distributed database. There are always a few differences depending on where you measure. And it's decentralized, which means that anyone can make decisions on his local domain, which may or may not be seen by the rest of the world. The DNS map domain names to various data, of course IP addresses, but not only IP addresses, XMPP servers, email servers, etc. It's, as I said, a very critical infrastructure. Anyone remembers the Dyn attack on 21st October when Andrew Sullivan talked at the IETF plenary in Seoul 2 weeks ago about the Dyn attack? He said that before the attack, nobody has ever heard of Dyn. And thanks to the attack, the marketing department of Dyn was very happy because now everybody knows the name of the company. So, like any critical infrastructure, people don't care when it works, like water or electricity. Nobody cares how it happened, but when it is down, everybody complains. So the DNS is really something that you have to monitor. Of course, at OSMC, I don't need to convince people that monitoring is good. But my experience is that I know a lot of people who have an Agio, Sysinga, Zabbix running on monitoring the router, the web server, the LDAP server, etc., and often forgetting to monitor the DNS service. That's bad. Because DNS is distributed, data is only loosely consistent, which means that you don't have a guarantee that everyone will see the same thing at the same moment. You may have difference, not lasting for long, but still you may have difference between what you see at one moment and another moment in another place. There are 2 kinds of DNS servers. And, I warn you, when there is a job interview at AFNIC, one of the first questions I ask when the guy said on this resume, I know DNS, one of the first questions I ask is the difference between resolver and authoritative server. Because it's one of the most important things and one of the things that people always keep forgetting. When someone talks about DNS server, it means nothing. I always interrupt him or her and say, oh, what sort of server? Resolver or authoritative? It's 2 very different beasts and raising very different problems. So you can monitor your DNS server with the usual tool. For instance, the command line tool dig is very useful. Don't use NSLOOKUP, by the way. NSLOOKUP does a lot of bad things. Forget it. Use dig or one of the competitors of dig, such as Drill or KDig, etc. So you can test very easily if that a web server, a DNS server is working with Dig. And if you want to automate the test, to repeat it in the usual monitoring way, you can use, for instance, the monitoring plugin CheckDig, available in the monitoring plugins repository, usable from Isinga, Nagios, what you want. And then you can monitor your DNS server and have nice trends, statistics, etc. So you can check that your name server works or not. But both tools only give you the local view. If you run Dig here from a machine connected to the OSMC SSID, you will have one view of the DNS, and other people somewhere else on the planet may have a different view. Same problem, of course, with CheckDig. If you monitor just from one point, you will have only a partial view, and it may be different in another place. Okay. Thank you. So why do we have differences between different vantage points? Why do we have to change? Where do we have to measure from several places? Because if you want a stable result, a temporary difference are normal with the DNS, because the DNS is only loosely consistent. If you update the data in the master name server, the secondary name server will have the information a few seconds later. If there is a problem, it may be a few minutes or hours later. So this sort of temporary differences are normal for the DNS. But permanent differences can occur because of geolocation. Many DNS servers give you a different result depending on where you are. Typically for big services like Netflix, Twitter, etc., you will get different answers, and it's normal, it's not a problem, it's a normal way of working. You may have routing problems. A recent example, very recent, from the first ISP in France, Orange, they had a strange routing problem, so their resolvers were not able to talk to most of the outside world. It worked, basically they were able to talk to France and part of Europe, but not to the US. So all the domain names where all the name servers were in the US were suddenly unreachable. And it worked, of course, from other ISP, and even for Orange, it worked for people who were using a different resolver. So the problem was only for the resolvers of the ISP. Bad luck. You can have, of course, censorship. Censorship, which manifests itself through lying resolvers. Resolvers that, instead of asking the authoritative servers, lie and send you wrong data, sending you to another site or anywhere. Censorship, of course, is very country dependent, which means that you will have completely different results depending on the country. You can have also name servers which are unfortunately unsynchronized for one reason or the other. For instance, a typical case when people were using a VI to edit zone file was you edit the zone file, you forget to update the serial number, then the secondaries don't get your information. Nowadays, this is less and less common, but at the time it was the biggest source of problem. You can have also cache poisoning. Cache poisoning is when someone sends a reply to a resolver, and the resolver accepts it when it shouldn't have. For instance, because the reply didn't come from the real authoritative server. If you manage to do so, you poison the cache because the wrong answer will be kept in the memory of the resolver. Of course, the solution is to use DNSSEC. Everybody uses DNSSEC, I'm sure of that. But if you don't, you have the risk of cache poisoning. A funny case of a problem with censorship was, again, in the case of Orange recently. In France, there is a list of terrorist domains which is made by the police. The list is secret, is not distributed. There is no judicial oversight on it. It's only compiled by the police, and then it is sent to the ISP, and the ISP are supposed to install this list in their resolvers, and then to lie if the domain name is in the list. Instead of giving the correct IP address, you give the IP address of a police website explaining to people that what they're trying to do is bad. On the 17th of October, Orange installed a wrong list, which was not the list from the police, and including Google, Wikipedia, and many other sites. After that, they said that it was a test. Well, okay. So every people who wanted to see Google or Wikipedia saw instead a web page of the Ministry of the Interior explaining that you tried to watch a terrorist website. And of course, many people were a bit upset by this sort of problem. So this was both a French-specific problem, because this list is only for France, and an Orange-specific problem, because they didn't use the correct list. Some people say that the list is sent by the police as a fax, so it's quite difficult to retype it, and many people make mistakes. But some people say the history of fax is not true. It's actually an Excel file which is sent by email, and people are supposed to convert it into DNS data. So the point is that we need distributed DNS monitoring. If you measure from only one point, you will see something which may be different from other people. That's why very often when we have this sort of problems, people cannot talk together because they measure from different points and they see different things. For instance, someone posts on Twitter, hey, I cannot see Google because it tells me that it is a terrorist website. Someone else say on Twitter, no, it works for me. And of course, both are right. So you really need to measure from different points. So an obvious solution is to use VPS around the world and to configure them, for instance, with Isinga 2 on the distributed monitoring, creating several nodes, etc. But of course, it's expensive. You need to buy or to rent the servers, and it doesn't scale. You can have, if you are a big internet company like Netflix, you already do that. You already have servers all around the world to do distributed monitoring of your system. But if you are not Netflix or Google or Twitter, if you are smaller, you probably cannot afford to have this sort of distributed monitoring. So, other solutions. The first one, the most obvious, is open resolvers. Open resolvers are DNS resolvers which are accepting requests from anyone. So it's great for distributed monitoring because you can query an open resolver in Japan, and then you will know what the Japanese see about your domain. At a time, a long time ago, when I was young, open resolvers were the norm. Every resolver was an open resolver. This was a long time ago. Now, today, it's bad. Bad because RFC 5358 says that it is bad. Basically, an open resolver can be used for reflection attack because typically on the DNS, the answer is bigger than the query, which means that if you send a question and you will get back an answer which is larger. So if you lie on your source IP address, the answer will go to your victim. And it's very easy because the DNS runs over UDP, where there is zero protection against forging the source IP address. So because of that, open resolvers are supposed to be a thing of the past. It's bad practice. But you know the internet. When something is bad practice, and when all the authorities on the internet say that it is bad, you still have millions of them, and worse, it doesn't seem that the number is decreasing. So, because typically open resolvers are unmanaged machines that everyone forgot about, machine somewhere in a closet, etc. Sometimes there are also bad configure things, because the trend now is the Internet of Things. Every time there is a problem, it's the fault of the Internet of Things. So, for instance, in South Korea, one ISP managed to ship to all the customers CPE, which was an open resolver, accepting requests from the outside. And then suddenly, millions of innocent people in South Korea had an open resolver on their network, which could be used for reflection attack. So that's the problem. There is no easy solution against that. So, because of that, open resolvers are very useful for researchers, so a lot of scientific papers rely on it, and of course it can be used for debugging. So, good things, the pros, you can use a regular DNS. They speak regular DNS, so you can use a regular DNS client like a Dig, a ShackDig, etc. You don't need anything special. There are many of them, millions of them. And there are even people who publish lists of name servers of open resolvers. Of course, this sort of list gets outdated quite quickly, but you can keep them up to date. And if you don't want to write the program yourself to query a lot of open resolvers, don't worry, tools already exist. Or you may think that it is quite easy because you just write a script that passes this file and call dig for every request. Bad idea. Because the open resolvers are unmanaged, many of them don't reply, timeout. So if you do it sequentially on this file, it will take millions of years before your queries are over. You have to do it in parallel, and this is exactly what this program, the NSCO, is doing. So it's great, it works fine, no problem. Well, there are some cons. First one is, of course, the list is always changing because the open resolvers come and go. Because they are not official machines, you don't have a lot of metadata, so you cannot select a subset of the open resolvers. You can on some things. For instance, from the IP address, you can guess the country, you can find the autonomous system, this sort of thing, but it's not perfect. Of course, if you want to test the real resolvers used by ordinary people, it's no good. For instance, if you have reports that your website doesn't work from Japan and people have a message saying that NX domain or something like that, you may test with open resolvers in Japan, but the problem may come from the ordinary resolvers that the people are using, which are not the same. And of course, there is a problem of legality and morality, because open resolvers are not supposed to be open. Most often, it's a result of a mistake. Legally and morally, legally at least in Europe, and morally, you cannot take advantage of the mistake of people, or some people did. If someone forgets to lock his house when leaving in the morning, it doesn't mean that you have the right to go inside and see what you want. Same thing for open resolvers. So for instance, scientific papers based on open resolvers, in my opinion, the ethical board of the university should look at it. So I'm not a lawyer, by the way. So take this with a grain of salt. Now you have public resolvers. What is the difference between open and public? It's open resolvers are open by mistake. Public are open because the people who manage them want them to be open. So it's no longer a problem of morality or legality. To protect themselves on the internet against reflection attacks, typically public resolvers have some sort of rate limiting. They are professionally supervised, which means that there is someone watching the beautiful Grafana pictures and raising an alarm if there is suddenly too much traffic. Examples of public resolvers, well, everybody knows Google Public DNS, but there is also Yandex DNS. If you are afraid that Google Public DNS sends all your data to the CIA, you can use Yandex DNS, and then it will be sent to the FSB instead. You can use a VeriSign Public DNS on Cisco Open DNS. They are the most famous, but there are many others public resolvers. So the pro, because they are typically professionally managed on open public on purpose, typically they are always on. You can rely on them, unlike open resolvers, where in a list of open resolvers, you have always a lot of broken machines. So you can use also regular DNS, of course, and this time you don't have legal or moral issue because they are meant to be queried. So don't worry. Cons. Well, you don't always have these resolvers where you need them, and because most of them use Anycast, it's not easy to get a view from a specific point. If you ask Google Public DNS here in Germany, your request will be sent probably to a Google machine in Germany, and if you have a problem in Japan, you have no easy way to query the Google Public DNS servers in Japan. Of course, because they are well known, and there are not many of them, they can be blocked or hijacked. Blocked is serious enough, but hijacked is much worse. During a popular uprising in Turkey, for instance, Turkish Telecom, which is the biggest ISP in Turkey, decided to inject a false route for 8888 in its routing system. Then people who thought they were talking to Google Public DNS were instead talking to a lying resolver. And that's a big problem. And of course, if I move outside of the field of the camera, it's even bigger problem, but let's go back here. So this sort of thing is very important because very often people use these public resolvers when they want to work around, for instance, state censorship. And it's very important to repeat to people that there is no authentication, not even the smallest authentication, for most of these public resolvers. The only exception is Cisco Open DNS. In the case of Cisco Open DNS, you can use DNSCrypt, and DNSCrypt provides authentication. So it's the only one which is protected against hijacking. Then, second step is to use DNS Looking Glass. The term Looking Glass comes, of course, from the BGP world. BGP has the same problem as the DNS. Not everybody sees exactly the same content in BGP because it depends on filtering policy, how you select routes, which routes do you transmit, and which do you keep for yourself, this sort of thing. So it's now for a very long time that the BGP people developed Looking Glass, which are services allowing you to see what the people see at this point or this point on this router. So for the DNS, they are not a resolver, they are a simple proxy. Typically, it's a service that you call from the outside, and then which will ask a local resolver. Typically, of course, they use the web, because, well, everyone uses the web. In the best case, they also have an API, typically with REST, because, well, today, everybody uses REST with JSON. So the important point is to have structured output, which means that it can be parsed by a program. So the pro, well, because when they use the web, it can be useful for an ordinary user, because the typical user, when they report a problem, and when you tell them to use Dig, well, it can be a problem, especially because Dig is not installed by default on Windows. So having a way for ordinary user to query the Looking Glass is great. When you use REST, it's accessible for ordinary programmers. Ordinary programmers are the people who use JavaScript or PHP or this sort of thing. When you have a REST interface producing JSON, ordinary programmers can make DNS requests. And if you want source code, well, you have two examples here of free software implementation of a DNS Looking Glass. The first one is in Python. The second one, I don't remember, but I think it's Python too. I'm not sure. You have to check. Of course, the problem, today, it's the same problem with BGP Looking Glass, by the way. We don't have a comprehensive and up-to-date list. When you use BGP Looking Glass, one of the problems is that when you have a problem with AS 1234, you have to search a looking glass in this AS, and of course, there is none, or it doesn't work, or it worked at a time, but it no longer, etc. Today, unlike BGP Looking Glass, which are an old thing, DNS Looking Glass are quite recent, and you don't find always a DNS Looking Glass when you need it. They don't use DNS, but protocols, and there is no standard for that. For instance, well, REST, of course, is a standard in a way, but the details of what endpoint to use, what URL to use, what is the output format, these details are completely non-standard at this time. There have been attempts, for instance, in the IETF, there have been drafts which have been written about how to represent DNS data in JSON or XML or things like that. The one for XML has expired a long time ago, and probably today there is not much interest in reviving them. JSON still under discussion. This one is still under discussion. So if you have an opinion about DNS in JSON, if you want DNS in JSON, speak now. So here is an example with the web. Here in the URL, you see the domain that I want to query, the type. So netwest.de, type NS. I find two name servers, the TTL here, and a few details such as the IP address of the resolver which was used. Well, in that case, it doesn't help a lot, except that you know that the resolver was running on the same machine. But you have the details here. Of course, it's better with JSON. So here is the same query, but formatted in JSON. So, well, nothing extraordinary. It's normal JSON, but for the people who program in JavaScript, for instance, it may be interesting because it allows them to parse the data and to do something with it. Another solution is the ring. The ring is a group of servers. It was originally an idea from the NLNOG people, Dutch network operators group. And it's a group of servers maintained by operators. The idea is that each member of the ring install a machine on his own network and then give access to the ring maintainers. So all the machines provide similar services and can be used for remote debugging, for instance, with SSH. For instance, with the ring all command. The ring all command will connect to every server of the ring and will perform this query. Here with Dig. So it's great for distributed debugging. It's nice because it's something which is done by the people, for the people. Well, it's a good internet cooperation. The servers are full Unix machines, so you can do a lot of things with them. It's some sort of friendly botnet, a botnet for the good. The biggest problem, of course, is that there is no public access. You have to be a member of the ring. It's give-take. You give a server to the ring, you have the access to all the servers of the ring. Otherwise, if you are an ordinary user or an ordinary ISP which is not a member of the ring, well, you don't have a solution. But the idea is great. Then you have the Atlas probes. A lot of people at OSMC show you nice, funny things connected to the internet and doing interesting things, while the Atlas probes has nothing extraordinary. It's just a TP-Link box. So I don't even take it out of the bag because it's closed. And anyway, it's just an ordinary TP-Link router with Linux, BusyBox, etc. The point of the Atlas probes is that there are hardware, which means dedicated to measurement and monitoring. You install them in your networks, and then they are managed by the WIPE-NCC, which control the command and control center of the boxes. Again, a friendly botnet. all the Atlas probes in the world report to the WIPE NCC. When they are up, you just have to give them power on Ethernet. And of course, a DHCP server so they can have an address. Once they are up, they report to the WIPE NCC, and then they can be used to perform measurements. Active measurements. The Atlas probes don't do passive measurements. They don't spy on your network. But they can do active measurements with ICMP, DNS, UDP and ICMP to do traceroute, and very, very limited HTTP requests. Very limited, because the idea is to avoid turning them into an actual dangerous botnet. So you cannot use them to trigger the download of a 1 terabyte file. The important thing for us is DNS, and the good thing is that you have an API to measure, to trigger measurements with the Atlas probes. And the API allows you to select probes based on many criteria: country, AS, prefix, whether they can do IPv6 or not, this sort of thing. So the Pro, there are now 10,000 probes, which is certainly the largest measurement network in the world. Very few people can afford to have 10,000 probes in the entire world. The API is great. It works, it's easy, etc. The service is stable and reliable because it's managed by nice people. And for the case of the DNS, you have a lot of options. You can do a lot of things. The problem, of course, because they are installed by volunteer, the distribution is quite unequal. For instance, in Africa, there are very few Atlas probes. In Mauritania, for instance, there is only one, and apparently it's down. In Algeria, which is much larger than Mauritania, there are only 2 probes, etc. There are also some limitations. For instance, with DNS, you have to set the recursion desired bit in order to avoid an attack known as cache snooping. And also, there is a public access, because anyone can create an account on the WIPE NCC access site, anyone. You don't need to have any relationship with the WIPE NCC. You go to the site, you register, you receive a confirmation link by email, usual stuff. But in order to start measurements, you need credits, and credits are obtained from the WIPE NCC. For instance, if you host a probe, you automatically get credits. If you sponsor the project, send money. If you sponsor the project, you have credits. If you are a member of the WIPE NCC, which is basically if you are an ISP in Europe, you also have credits, 1 million credits per month. And of course, you can ask politely. For instance, myself, I have too many credits, so I can't send credits. There is a transfer of credits which is possible, so you can ask me and I will send you credits. Or if you are a student and if you have a great idea on measurement of the internet, you ask politely the WIPE NCC and you will get credits. The goal of credits is not to make money, it's just a sort of rate limiter to avoid people who would abuse the system. So here, using the API, I developed a small program called Atlas Resolve, which simply use the API to ask probes to perform DNS resolution. Here, I request 10 probes. I want to use the query type AAAA, IPv6 address, on this name. And I get, well, I asked 10 probes, and I got 10 answers, good. And all answers gave the same result. Great. At this time, of course. In the future, it may change. Now, if I use this by selecting probes only in France, here, country, and asking for a domain name which is a bit more questionable, you can see that among the 20 probes, 10 gave the correct answer, here. 4, remember, serve fail. Serve fail may be a technical problem. It means server failure. It can be a technical problem, or it can be censorship, hard to know. But NX domain is certainly a lie, because the domain exists. So this one is certainly censorship. And of course, the 3 probes whose resolver returned localhost, it's also certainly censorship. So that's a good example because censorship is very country specific, of course. If you do the same test with country D, it will work, and in all cases. So that's a good example where you need remote DNS access, remote DNS monitoring. Of course, not everything is perfect in the world. You have some issues. If you send a request, any request, whether you use the Atlas probes or open resolvers or public resolvers, when you send a request and if you have the RD bit set, RD being recursion desired, you fill the cache because you ask the machines on the other end to make a request and to store them in the cache. Which means that in some case, if there is a problem going on, you poison the cache. Let's say that there is a domain name hijacking. For instance, someone managed to get the password that Mr. Smith is using to manage his domain on DNS hoster. And Mr. Smith chose the password Smith, for instance. So someone managed to find it, logged in at the DNS hoster website, and modify the domain to send it elsewhere. This is not a theoretical case. It happens all the time. The most famous case was 3 years ago, hijacking of the New York Times domain. Most reports in the media were wrong. Most reports said that the website of the New York Times had been hijacked. No, the website was perfectly intact. Simply, the people managed to hijack the registrar. Then, once you control the registrar, you can change the data at will and send the domain to anything else. In that case, it was redirected by the SEA. SEA is a Syrian Electronic Army, and it's a pro-Assad group who redirected the NewYorkTimes.com domain to a website that they were controlling with a political message on it. So if there is this sort of problem, of course the problem was detected and fixed, but because there are cache in the DNS, if you do the request when there is a problem, you may poison the cache with the data from the attacker. So it's better to refrain yourself to doing so. And before you do a request on every Atlas probes in the world, every open resolver, think of the consequences. And of course, if you are the attacker, do the opposite. But don't tell that I told you so. And of course, we have the problem of the lack of standards, especially for the looking glass, which means that it's the same problem with BGP, by the way. If you want to query a lot of BGP looking glass or DNS looking glass, you typically have to develop a program that will scrap the result, try to rearrange, much like the talk yesterday about monitoring of the real world, when we had a good example of a website of the bank scrapping with bash, tr, and sed. Typically with looking glass, you often have to do this sort of thing. Lack of a list of public resolvers on looking glass. Public resolvers, there are only a few, so it's not a problem. But for the looking glass, it may be a problem. And of course, you can help. You can help because it depends on the number of probes in the world. So you should set up DNS looking glass to help mankind. You should ask for wipe Atlas probes or install them on your network. And if you don't have any questions, I will do a little demo, but maybe you have questions first before we play with the demo. Yeah.
Hi, you talked about the Google DNS being hijacked in Turkey. Do you have any knowledge about whether any DNSSEC validated domains were also hijacked with that? Because just hijacking the DNS, Google DNS via BGP route should have avoided any DNS validation. Or
There are several points actually in this question, because by the way, it was not BGP because it was done in the internal routing of Turkish Telecom. It's the only ISP in Turkey with international access. So all the other ISP have to go through the network of Turkish Telecom. So in the case of DNSSEC, it depends where the validation is done. Most people rely on the resolver. If the resolver is Google Public DNS, they rely on validation done by Google Public DNS. And if it's not the real Google Public DNS, they're screwed. No other word. So that's a point that very often people forget. When you trust the DNSSEC validation by your resolver, you actually trust two things. You trust the resolver, that's quite obvious, but you also trust the network between you and them. If your resolver is in the same premises, for instance, you are a small company, all the machines are on the same floor in the building, so you have some physical security and you have a reasonable chance that access to the resolver is secure and you are really talking to your resolver. But if the resolver is a public resolver hundreds of kilometers away, bad luck. So the only solution is to have an authentication of the resolver, or to do validation yourself. Basically, DNSSEC validation, in my opinion, must be done locally. Even if you use a big public resolver to get the data, validation of the data has to be done locally. Typically, the obvious place to do it is in the CPE. You install a machine with OpenWRT, such as Turris Omnia, for instance, and validation is done on this machine for the benefit of the entire local network. Because the problem with using Google Public DNS for DNSSEC validation is not that I mistrust Google. The problem is that I mistrust what's between Google and me. And in the case of Turkey, that was a good example. A solution would be to have authentication of the resolver. There is a standard for that, RFC 7858, which up to now nobody yet deployed, but we should.
I was looking into the DNS looking glasses for distributed DNS monitoring or something like that. But the answers that they give, they don't say anything about individual authoritative name servers. So I can check whether a certain DNS name resolves to a certain IP address, but I don't know which authoritative name server produced this result. Is there any way I can use these looking glasses to monitor individual authoritative name servers? Do you know about that?
It depends on the looking glass, so you have to ask the manager of this specific looking glass. All the DNS looking glass I know of are not resolvers. They rely on a resolver, which means that the process behind it, querying the authoritative, finding the right authoritative, etc., is completely hidden from the looking glass. The looking glass only sees the result. If you want to do what you suggested, the looking glass has to be a full resolver, knowing what's going on, and technically it's a bit more complicated. It's certainly feasible, but it's more complicated. And today I know no machine which does it.
Do you know if there are currently proposals for like underscore looking glass text record or a looking glass attribute in your AS whois data, so you can actually have a standard way to discover? Does this AS provide a looking glass service?
No. Same problem for BGP, by the way. We don't have a looking glass discovery, even in theory. So if someone wants to work on it, that would be great. But no, we don't have it. So just to show that I was not joking, that it really works, up. So a bit of demo. So here, for instance, we have one DNS looking glass querying here. It's at the University of Duisburg, if I'm correct. Not sure I pronounce it. Duisburg Essen. From this looking glass, you have here the details. You will query a new TLD. It was created yesterday. That's a good example. Type NS. We see the name servers, and of course the time to live. Here it's the web interface. The good thing about the web interface is that you know that the web has links. So you can click on the links. You click on the name server. You have the IP addresses of the name server here. And if you follow them, you have the opposite, which is from the address to the name. Then you can get the name, and you can see that the domain, the TLD Catholic, is actually managed by the provider RI here, which is one of the biggest provider of new TLD. Of course, this is formatted in HTML, but we can also use it with a structured output. And we'll ask JSON. We get the same thing. So here's the address of brand.delta.awdns.net.au, format JSON, and we get here two answers because there is one with type A, one with type quad A, so V4 and V6. It works not only with an explicit mention, but you can also use content negotiation. After all, HTTP was done for that. You can specify here the type of data that you accept. So here I accept JSON only, and then it fails. That's the demo effect. What was the problem? Well, it should work. I will try with another DNS looking glass because maybe I made some mistake when configuring the server. Okay, this one works. Great thing about distributed monitoring is that it depends. So this one works. Here we add a HTTP header to curl, and this header is accept on the MIME type application JSON. So here I get JSON. If instead of JSON I say I want XML, yeah, then I get XML. For the people who are still using XML, XML was trendy a few years ago. Now it's JSON, but I'm confident that in the next years JSON will appear completely outdated and people will use what? CBOR, maybe? Something like that. So here is the result in XML. And of course, you can have many other formats, such as, for instance, I discovered quite recently that there is a standard MIME type, text/DNS, for the zone file format. The traditional zone file format of the DNS here. So you can take the result of the looking glass and parse it. If we want to play with the Atlas probes instead, we will ask, for instance, the domain netways.de, not from Brazil. Let's try Argentina, for instance. So here, I ask, zoom in a bit larger. We ask 10 probes in Argentina and to turn the name www.netways.de into an IP address. It takes more time. That's a live demo because my program here talks to the WIPE NCC through the Atlas API, and then the WIPE NCC has to select the probes in Argentina, find out those who are available, not overloaded by other measurements, then to tell them, do the measurement, then the probes will do the thing, will do the DNS request, and will report to the WIPE NCC, and I will get the result. So it may take more or less time. That's the problem of live demo. Of course, it's it's not so fast. Okay, here we have the answer. 10 answers, great. And everybody in Argentina agree with this IP address. Good. Now, if I want to do it with DNS-Yo, which is using the Open Resolver, let's see if I have open resolvers in Argentina, I'm not sure. Okay, DNSio is using its list. By default, it asks for 500 open resolver, but in the list there is only one in Argentina, which is probably not true. There are certainly much more open resolvers in this country, simply that they are not in the list used by DNSio. The good thing about a program like DNSio is that it does request in parallel, which is really necessary with open resolvers because many of them don't reply at all when you need them. But the other good thing is that it is a list of open resolvers, because otherwise you have to manage this list yourself, and open resolvers appear and disappear all the time. So here, the only server available in Argentina replied timeout. Great. Okay, let's try in another country. In Belgium, only 2 in the list. Remember also that we depend on the quality of geolocation, of course, because typically the input is only a list of IP address. From the list of IP address, you have to find the country. Okay, at least one replied, and the reply is the same. The other got a timeout. Well, okay, not too bad. If I try in France for the domain that we explored with the Atlas probe, the piratebay.sc, 32 servers available. Okay, and we can see that half of them gave the good result, and the other had various problems. No answer typically means that they got a surf fail or something like that. So, an example. Another example of why distributed monitoring is useful. It was done from 2 different machines, so I was using simply 2 VPS in different countries, one in France, one in the US. This one is an Anycast DNS hoster, and they did something very strange at one moment. Here I asked for DNSSEC signatures, but I got none. And it's not normal, because this domain is signed, and there is a DS record in .fr, and at the same moment, when I was querying with exactly the same request, but from a machine in the US, I got to a different instance of DNS200.anycast.me, and the other instance was serving DNSSEC signatures. It lasted 2 hours, and during these 2 hours, depending on whether your resolver was querying a machine was in France or in the US, you got server failure in one case and proper DNSSEC validation in the other. So it's a good example of why you need distributed monitoring, because this problem was discussed in some forum in France, and someone used DNSViz, which is a well-known debugging tool for DNSSEC, and said, okay, DNSViz, everything is green, no problem. But DNSViz is located in the US, so was lucky enough to talk to the correct authoritative name server. So remember always to do tests from different places. And one last thing is an example of a hijacking. Meteofrance.com is a national weather service. It was hijacked. The domain name was hijacked. And the guy managed to redirect it to a server with a political message. So, okay. So here is a DNS-Yo query during the problem. And it's in verbose mode, so there is the address. So here, some of the open resolvers saw pirate, hijackers, etc. Actually, Hostinger is a legitimate service. It's a DNS hoster where there is a free access during the first month. So you set up an account, you can use their name servers for 1 month. This is what the hijacker did. So they are not part of the hijack. But at this time, part of the server of the resolvers already saw the correct answer. So we had different answers on this one, even a third one. So we had different answers at the same time, because the hijacking was already fixed, but because of DNS cache, not everybody saw the right NS. Actually, the hijacker modified the NS source record set, the list of name servers. When it was fixed and back to the normal, some resolvers had the wrong information in the cache, some the right one. And that's why sometimes you see on some mailing list people saying, okay, we have been hijacked, could you flush the cache of your resolver? I remember once when Microsoft did it, because WindowsUpdate.com was hijacked, which is of course a big problem. So Microsoft sent a message to several mailing lists saying, could you please flush your resolver cache? And of course some people will do it, some won't. So it's not really a best way to address the problem, but sometimes you have no choice. So in that case, it worked fine. The problem is because the hosting chosen by the attacker was gratis for the first months, there was a strict rate limiter. So only a few people saw the political message. Most of the people who tried to visit the National Weather Service at this time show a message saying that, oh, too many requests, you should upgrade to premium service, etc. So, thank you. If there is something else you want to see with DNS, you can ask during the lunch or after. And don't hesitate to come back to me with questions, remarks, etc. Thank you.